Hey guys, Russell Linville here. Thanks for tuning in. This is a Nerd Out Wednesday, a part of the Become a Better Human project. Today we're talking about adverse neural tension. If you've never heard of this term, adverse neural tension, then I invite you to check out some of the articles I'm going to put in the show notes. Adverse neural tension is when you usually sustained after an injury where your nervous system tissue, peripheral nerves, get stretched or get put in a position that creates discomfort and pain, and in response your body will restrict range of motion to prevent you from stretching your neural tissue to that or injuring your neural tissue to that extent again. So the whole topic of this came up because I think adverse neural tension has to do with why athletes cannot touch their toes. And in a previous video I talked about my opinion is that every athlete, regardless of your sport, should be able to bend forward from the waist and touch their toes or touch the ground. I think if you're an athlete at any higher caliber than middle school, you better be able to touch your toes. I think that's a good, just general movement ability that you need to have. Otherwise, are you really moving very efficiently? That just tells us there's some sort of breakdown in the kinetic chain, whether that's true muscular tightness, joint restriction, right? Joint capsule restrictions. If a previous injury is limiting you, based on a surgical intervention or something like that. But I think a lot of this has to do with neural tension. And this is again my opinion, but I'll put some of these articles so you can read through them too. We know that adverse neural tension occurs after an injury, right? Especially we see this in the research in hamstring strains, grade 1 strains. If you're a repetitive hamstring strainer, over time you're going to develop a response, I guess a central nervous system, peripheral nervous system response that's going to limit you from accessing certain ranges of motion because your body and brain is telling you that these ranges of motion have hurt me in the past and we're not going to let you get to that range of motion. So we're going to create this neural tension that feels a lot like stretching and we're going to limit you from accessing that range of motion. So how do we settle down the nervous system and get it to, create this accessible range of motion? Well, that's a couple of things that you guys can work on at home after piling through these articles. There is, I think a high correlation with some of what we think of like Eastern medicine interventions, such as yoga and breathing techniques and things like this. All those interventions that help down-regulate the nervous system. I think if we can calm our nervous system, for lack of a better term, then we'll have access to some of this range of motion. I also think that, we talk about nerve sliders, nerve gliders, nerve tension positions, and you can think about upper limb tension tests, slump test, straight leg raise. We can do those repeatedly in a pain-free range or work up into our pain-free range. And eventually that seems to calm down the nervous system a little bit as well. We think about that too with like a prone extension test. I guess typically that's we think of like, I guess that's a term of adverse neural tension down the legs. But you think of your McKenzie exercises, that sort of thing. So we'll dive into some of the interventions probably at a later point. But if you can't touch your toes, don't just think that you have tight hamstrings or tight calves or tight muscles in your low back. You might, but if you're a developing athlete, young athlete, say middle school to high school, and you're having trouble touching your toes, let's try to do some nerve gliders, nerve sliders. Let's see if that helps. And, this is just a ballpark number, but 50-60% of the people that I see in this age group of 13 to 18 years old that can't touch their toes, and we work on some neural mobility exercises, their reach gets a lot better. And this is just a quick test and helps build some patient confidence sometimes. It's like, man, this PT, he just did some voodoo magic on me. I don't know, I couldn't barely get halfway down my shins. Now I can touch my toes. And all we did was some nerve gliding. So I'll link to these articles. One's called Assessing Adverse Neural Tension in Athletes by Scott Gallant. The other one is Adverse Neural Tension, a Factor in Repetitive Hamstring Strains. And I'll link to those articles. Don't just think it's the hamstrings that are tight. I think there's maybe a contributing factor, but dive a little deeper, be a little better than just you got tight hamstrings, go do a hamstring stretch. Think about what else you can do to help improve someone's mobility. Thanks for tuning in. This is Nerd Out Wednesday, Become a Better Human Project. Today was all about adverse neural tension. We'll see you next time. Thanks.